Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Helen Edwards, and we're going to be talking about Helen's book, From Marginal to Mainstream, Why Tomorrow's Brand Growth Will Come from the Fringes and How to Get There First. Now, before I'm going to ask you your first question, Helen, this is my favorite book of the year so far.
Are you just saying that, or is that really
true? And anybody who watches this can I read a lot of good books, but this is my favorite so far this year.
Thank you.
So you currently, here we are in April, you're winning the Book of the Year award, even though we're 4 months in. Where can people find you?
They can find me in person, as we were just talking about it, at London Business School. So I'm a professor of marketing, adjunct professor of marketing at London Business School, where I teach mainly during the summer term. And you can find me virtually. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So please come and find me on LinkedIn, because I really enjoy LinkedIn as a social platform and get involved in it. So that's the easiest place to find me, is on LinkedIn. And my own business, which is called Passionbrand and has a website, which is passionbrand.com. So any of those two routes are probably where I'll be most responsive. I am on Twitter, but I'm not that responsive on Twitter.
I just Googled you, and you're pretty much you are on the first page. So but so people, if they want to Google you, and we can get that on Amazon, I'm assuming, or Kogan
Page. Amazon really easily. It's published by Kogan Page. So if you go onto Kogan Page and buy it from them, you get a slight discount. Not a very exciting one, but a slight one.
So tell us about it, Helen. What was the inspiration for the book? Why did you write it?
I wrote it because during COVID, I got involved with a restaurant chain in the UK who were in a slight panic because they were meat-based, and they were trying to work out what the vegan option was going to be. What are we going to do about all these vegans? And lockdown seemed like a good opportunity to just get across this and work out how to deal with vegans. And it made me think, well, why are we in a panic about this? Shouldn't we have seen this coming a bit earlier? Why didn't we see this coming a bit earlier? Why couldn't we have got ahead of this instead of like rushing to catch up? And it made me think about, well, veganism, I thought in my head, had been around for a while, and it has indeed been around since post-war in Britain. And I thought, I wonder it was a marginal behavior, like less than 3% of the population doing it for ages. And then it took off about 2017. And with that, just armed with that fact, I kind of thought, I wonder if there are more marginal behaviors out there, behaviors that people choose to do from a lifestyle perspective, not a consumption perspective. I just want to live like this. And could we be better as marketers, as business people, at predicting and seeing them, and then seeing which ones are likely to take off and which ones are going to be marginal now and stay marginal far into the future, like homeopathy, for example. And so that's what inspired it, a desire to see what was out there and see if you could understand these behaviors better.
Because you list out a whole load of things that were at the margins, which have now become more or less mainstream. So eating insects is it's not something that I particularly do, but it's becoming more and more mainstream. You also talk about the interesting one, and I'm talking about this from a marketing perspective, is that naturism, for example, actually had a brand change because it used to be called nudism, and that didn't seem to fit the piece. And now it being called naturism, with that rebranding, has now become, I'm not saying, again, it's not necessarily marginal anymore, but it's becoming mainstream. And you give all of these different, and what I loved about it, I shouldn't really be talking, it should be you. What I love about it is the fact that you give all of these examples. You go, yeah, because I was a vegetarian 30 years ago, and I could never get any food, so you give up. Yeah. Now you've got even vegan options.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think what we did is we went out to look for more marginal behaviors, and some of those are already on the move. So in fact, I've literally just finished a whole new set of new research in partnership with Kantar. So they've invested in it. And we picked off 10 behaviors that we thought were really interesting and on the move, like, for example, insect protein, homeschooling, new nomadism or digital nomadism, which is really moving, living from the sea. We picked off 10, super aging. we picked off 10 that we thought were really interesting, and we've done a really deep dive into them. Literally just now, I've just got the results from the UK, US, and Brazil to see what's going on there, so that it becomes a useful innovation potential platform for business. But yeah, there are so many clues. So reframing is really important. So if we take insect protein, for example, part of the reason that people resist insect protein is because they feel like it's disgusting and dirty and horrible. And a lot of the entrepreneurs who were out there with insect protein were sort of playing into that, like joking about, crunchy crickets. Whereas what we discovered is actually, if you reframe it and maybe talk about insect protein as like original protein, which it is, it's been in the food chain for hundreds of years, billions of years, then people begin to stand back and go, oh, okay, well, maybe that makes it a bit more acceptable. And we saw something similar in veganism, the switch from vegan to plant-based switched how people think about it. So, but that means that we as marketers, as salespeople, as business people can step in and see a way to reframe that could get people thinking differently. And that's its potential for kind of business and growth.
But it's interesting how you describe the move to veganism, whereas when it first started off, the argument was, do I eat meat or not? And well, I do or I don't. And then with the reframing, what they were able to do is completely change the argument. And of course, with plant-based, it's a case of, well, it looks like meat, it tastes like meat, it could be meat. I remember I was in San Francisco in 2019, and I was in one of the first plant-based burger bars, and I had a plant-based burger. I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. I mean, product it's interesting actually, I think, with plant-based at the moment, because I think in the UK we're seeing a bit of a shakeout.
Yes.
And you're seeing in the news that, the veganism, explosion is over. I don't think it's over. I think we're just seeing the bad products, go to the wall, as they should, because consumers won't buy bad products. But there are some great products out there. And it does mean that, I think for me, the difference for businesses and innovators is that for many years, we've looked at innovation a bit like through the eyes of Clayton Christensen and disruptive innovation. And I think that's absolutely right. And I'm not saying there's not an opportunity there anymore. But the idea there is that we as a business, it's like supply side, we develop a new technology or a new way of doing things that cuts across a whole category, and we get explosive growth. And all I'm saying is, keep doing that. But another way to innovate is to look at what people are doing and innovate against that. And if there's a behavior out there that only a few people are doing right now, but other people feel inspired by it, but they can't quite do it, a bit like you were talking about, it's hard, it's expensive. It means a business or an entrepreneur can step in and make it easier, basically. And that's the opportunity.
Yes, and I think that, and what I loved is this thing about the opportunity, which is traditionally what we do is we say, here is a product, and I love it because it pays my mortgage. Therefore, I'm going to go out to everybody and tell everybody about it, and everybody will love it because I love it. And of course, what happens is that actually, I don't know who you are. I don't really care. I've got lots of other things, and I've got my own thing to market. And what you're talking about is that actually most people are actually on the margins. And you also say that once you get into the mainstream, actually that's when it becomes crowded and noisy.
Yeah.
So the exciting place is to be on the margins, because you can say, well, we did 100,000 this year. We did next year we'll do another 100,000. We grew by 100%. Whereas when you're in the mainstream, so to talk to us about that.
About that, well, I suppose what we discovered was that actually you can read these behaviors better. So, and I wouldn't have written the book if I couldn't. So we did some analysis, and we worked out there are ways to understand these behaviors better, so you know which ones have got greater potential for moving into the mainstream. But also, it's not just that. It's like they don't act alone. It's you as a business or as an entrepreneur can help move them into the mainstream by reframing or diluting, allowing people to do a little bit of it because they're kind of interested in it. And that, I guess, is the opportunity. And I think this point that if something's already in the mainstream and you find yourself going, we need to create our version of that, you're already behind. And what you see is that the businesses that are in these behaviors early are the ones that tend to benefit the most. So this will blow your mind, but in 1969, someone was arrested for jogging in America. And it's because no one did it. Exercise for its own sake was a marginal behavior. So they were arrested because they were obviously running away from something bad that they'd done. Nobody jogged. So people got arrested. They got stopped by the police. By the middle of the next decade, so less than a decade later, it was mainstream, and exercise for its own sake just took off. Yeah. Now, one of the brands that was in that from the get-go was Nike, because Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman created a running shoe to help people, because before we were just using those kind of plimsoll things, to help people, the impact on knees and hips. Nike have done extremely well by being in from the get-go. And Phil Knight even talks about, we rode the wave. And you want to be riding the wave rather than playing catch up. And if you take something like Oatly, similarly, they were part of, I think, reframing plant-based oat milk into something much more consumer friendly and attractive, and you didn't have to use it all the time. And only yesterday, one of my students was talking about Alpro must be really cross about this, because they've been sitting there for ages, and then Oatly comes in and just finds a way to unlock what people wanted to do anyway.
And it's interesting, and the jogging example in here is fascinating, because even now what we're seeing is a niching of the, there's a gym, but also what we're going to do is we're going to niche that gym with all the different types of gyms that are available.
Yeah, well, I think exercise for its own sake, which is what I ended up calling it, was quite hard to know what to call it. It's like we exercise because we want to exercise, as opposed to like we're carrying heavy shopping or we're doing some ironing. So exercise for its own sake really did only take off. And it sort of took off partly because of office work, this kind of thing. We're all sitting on our bums all the time. Took off because of that, and heart disease became an issue. So it was encouraged. But if you think about that as a marginal behaviour, it hasn't just fed one category. It's fed food and drink, clothing, tech-related fitness, gyms, and it continues to, as new exercise kind of comes in that people really like, from parkrun to Peloton to dance to rowing to padel, I think is going to take off. We're going to see soon. And someone else talked to me about surfing. It continues to feed, new categories and new industries.
Yes, there's pickleball in the States, which is a complete new sport. And I was saying to my partner the other day, I said, who is it that convinced us that to go cycling we had to wear a particular type of clothing, and running another type of clothing? And I said, when I started up, we just had a pair of plimsolls, and you ran in whatever you were wearing,
Yeah, I know. But look, yeah, you're right. I mean, how many pairs of trainers have we all got now? And they've convinced ourselves, well, I definitely need those ones to jog, and I definitely need those ones for yoga or whatever. So yeah.
So also, in the book, you talk about the thing is that the thing about the book is it's based on research. This is not Helen Edwards' opinion. You've actually done. So talk us about the research.
Yeah, so we did about 4 types of research. So we did some deep, and it is a we, I would say, there was a whole team that I worked with. We did some deep case analysis. So that's looking at the journey of veganism. So kind of, well, what happened? Really, what happened? Looking at the journey of mindfulness, which is another one. If you think about it, meditation's been around since the 60s. We've now got a big business. There are big businesses in mindfulness and sleep.
Massive.
Looking at that journey. Looking at homeopathy that didn't go anywhere. Trying to understand what got in the way and what made these things take off. So that's like deep secondary case analysis. We did that. Then we did some original quantitative research. So that was done in partnership with a company called The Nursery. And we did quantitative surveys among Main Street audiences in the UK and the US. We did 2 sets of that with population samples, a couple of thousand people each time. Then we also did focus groups. So we did focus groups with both people who partake in the marginal behaviour and people who don't, because we wanted to understand what could unlock it. So that's how I know that with insect protein, talking about original protein is an unlocker. We talk to people now who take part in the behaviours. So at the end of every chapter is a description of a current marginal behaviour through the eyes of someone who does it. So we went out and interviewed people, and we did some ethnography. So we joined in with some things like steampunk sessions to understand it. So a big tranche of original data, which then allowed us to bring all of that together. So one of the things we put in the book is a scale of behaviors. So we developed a statistical model which shows which behaviors, based on our research, ought to be floating to the top soon. And it's basically that I've just repeated this year. So yeah, original data was really important to me. You know, I didn't want to just kind of, here's my opinion, especially on something like this, because you can be so wrong. You know, I've sat in endless trend presentations where a year later you can go, well, that was wrong. You know, so the data was really important to me.
So I'm a marketer at an organization, and I think that I'm a marginal product. What is it that I need to look for to see that I'm a marginal person?
Well, I think as a marketer, probably what you're looking for more is, are there any marginal behaviors that could fuel the growth of my product? So because I think right now in many categories, especially in FMCG, but not all, even in technology, actually, we're looking at very stagnant growth. You know, it's a share game at the moment. And I think all that low hanging fruit of big tech breakthroughs have kind of come through. I think we'll see AI is going to change things clearly, but that's all sort of playing out as in the future. But and yeah, that's great, but why wait? I think what you're looking for is there a marginal behavior out there that could help, that mainstream people are interested in? So that's a really important thing that I could build off. So let me give you an example of that. Let's look at, say, digital nomads, new nomads.
Yeah.
That came very high on our scale. So this is people not literally want to give up their world, give up their lives and live in a caravan. But what you've got are people going, well, I'm probably going to be working till I'm about 90 anyway. I'd like to live my life a slightly different way. I'd like to maybe take a year off and do a bit of homeschooling and live there, but I need to work somehow. Now, categories that are getting in the way of that are financial services, mobile technology, education. Now, so that unlocks, so what happens then if I innovate a financial services product and insurances that would allow people to do that? I think it does a couple of things. It might not be your biggest money earner, but I think as a brand, it puts you at the forefront of innovation. And I think there will be people who want to buy in it. And then if it goes mainstream, this is one of these ones that we think will, you're ready to ride the wave of that growth instead of rushing to catch up and think, oh my goodness, what product are we going to launch? So I think that's what you would be looking for. You know, if I was working in skincare and hair care, you know, I think the whole area of, you know, no soap, no detergents, and the microbiome is still got plenty of growth in it. I would be looking for that.
Isn't it amazing that Body Shop isn't what the Body Shop was, but we're looking for like that. So the people that have come in and taken over are the I can't remember the next. You know, there's soap companies that have come in and taken that space.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Body Shop is because it's British as well, so it's easy for us to feel very sort of, you know, the Body Shop. I think there's lots to that story. So I think Natura had to sell it off partly because they were interest rates went up. They were over leveraged. They had to pay back interest rates that they couldn't afford, so they had to almost do a fire sale of Body Shop and Aesop. I'm not sure they would necessarily have sold them, but nevertheless, you know, it's not like L'Oreal or Natura were really able to do much with the Body Shop. And you kind of think there's so much about it that's so right around its sustainability, its simplicity, its commitment to animal welfare that really ought to have been, they should have found a way to make that relevant again, I think.
Yeah. What you talk about entrepreneurs actually get it. So maybe it was maybe that's what was actually required within the Body Shop, was actually to have someone with a more entrepreneurial, because you use Spill and Oatly as examples.
Yeah.
Of where, I mean, Oatly you know, where did they come from?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they have been around quite a long time. It's interesting getting behind, but they hadn't really managed to find a way of unlocking it for mainstream sort of inspiration. And I think it was really when they brought in a new CEO and particularly a new creative director, John Schoolcraft, and he said, we've got to make this less serious, more optional, more easy for people to try. And that unlocked what was clearly people thinking, well, I'd like to try more plant-based, but I just don't know how. So that really worked. But I think the thing about entrepreneurs is that by nature, they're willing to take more risks. And I think very often they're willing to spend a bit more time getting to something and iterating. And I understand why. When you work for a big corporates are much more risk averse, and I know exactly why. And there's often less time to get something right. But I think increasingly as we move in innovation, we talk a lot about experiments and being ready. And I think for me, this is where it sits. I think this sort of innovation is, look, I'm not saying launch a new brand and spend millions on it. I'm saying experiment, iterate, understand, learn, be ready to move, make a mistake, be ready to move instead of being like, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this thing that's just taken off in front of my eyes in my own category? I think that's the role it plays in established kind of corporate world.
Helen, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, From Marginal to Mainstream. And where can we get a copy?
Oh, definitely. Well, you can definitely get it in Amazon. It's also in all good bookshops.
It is. I've been in Waterstones, and it's in Waterstones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in Waterstones, it's at Paddington Station. So, always a joy when you see it IRL, as it was. It's fantastic.
And where can we find you?
You can find me, once again, LinkedIn is by definitely the best place to connect in with me. And in real life, I'm in London Business School.
Helen, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for writing a great book.
It's been a pleasure.